Are you ready for National Black Girl Month? April is National Black Girl Month, and this year, we're centering Black motherhood. National Black Girl Month is a call to celebrate, invest, and champion Black women and girls. Join the movement and spread the spark. Visit nationalblackgirlmonth.com. Welcome to Impact Innovators with Felicia Ford, where we dive into the strategies that empower changemaker brands to leave a lasting legacy. Think of this podcast as your audio playbook for meaningful action. What's possible when thought leaders, disruptors, and pioneers align to share their journeys? I'm Felicia Ford, your host, bringing together the brightest minds and the most groundbreaking ideas to help you drive change, navigate through the sticky stuff, and elevate your brand. Whether you're tackling funding hurdles, looking for growth strategies, or seeking the perfect balance between profit and purpose, we've got you covered. Stay tuned and be a part of a movement that's setting new benchmarks in how we think about progress, community, and doing. Let's innovate, impact, and inspire. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us again. I'm really excited about today's guest, and I have again with me today Dr. Rikesha Fry Brown as my co host. But first, I want you to think about the mothers who raised us. They didn't have manuals, yet they built legacies. Their wisdom carried through generations, shaping how we love, how we discipline, and how we nurture. But what happens when tradition collides with modern day? How are things changing and how are things staying the same? If we think about Big Mama's steadfast resilience meeting the nuanced, self aware parenting of millennial moms, what changes and similarities can we identify? Dr. Rosemarie Allen has spent her life unpacking these shifts, leading the charge in equity, education, and inclusive policy. From advising federal agencies to shaping early childhood education on a national scale, she's been at the forefront of creating spaces where every child and family is seen, valued, and empowered. In this special National Black Girl Month episode, co hosted again by my friend and co author and co founder, Dr. Rikesha Fry Brown, we're exploring the evolution of Black motherhood. How have parenting philosophies changed? What has stayed the same? And what do today's mothers need to know about raising the next generation with both ancestral wisdom and modern insight? So, we're going to explore this conversation reaching beyond the personal, and we're going to bring in culture and policy and the future of Black families. Let's lean in. Dr. Akisha?
So, Dr. Allen, thank you again for being here with us today. We know that your work centers on equity, education, and culture. And before we dive in, I would like for you to just tell us a little bit about what drew you to this work and if there was a pivotal moment that shaped your experience and set you on this path.
Absolutely. First, I want to say that I was raised by grandma. So, Big Mama is who raised me and the wisdom of her Big Mama. But I was also a very, very curious, explorative, or experimental child, always getting in trouble, always. Challenged the status quo very early. From what I heard, I started talking before I was 2 years old and started questioning things even then. Served me well at home. Well, my dad, when you hear me say my dad, because you're going to learn about these people throughout this podcast, that's actually my grandfather, but I called him daddy. And he really embraced it. No one else did. Because, I was also brought up in a home where you were to be seen and not heard. So when I went to school that curious, it was not received well. So I was suspended from probably the first week I stepped foot on school grounds, and suspended, I would say, at least 7 to 10 times a year, expelled from 3 schools. But I found that I was still nurtured at home. I was thankful that my family saw me as brilliant and as funny, even though it was difficult to raise a child like me. I knew home was still a safe space. So that's why I entered this work, because as harshly as I was treated at school, I loved school. I loved learning. I loved my friends. And very early, I didn't understand why I was in trouble all the time because some of the things I did at home, at school, they weren't. And I just remember at about first or second grade thinking, I want to be a teacher. And when I'm a teacher, I'll never treat anybody the way my teachers treat me.
Wow.
And from that point on, I mean, I was on this path of being a teacher. It started with my dolls and stuffed animals, teaching them every day, to grabbing the neighborhood kids and teaching them, and they would run away because they've been in school all day and didn't want to play school anymore. But yeah, that's my foundation.
I can relate to being raised by my grandfather and also to being that curious child. But I'm sitting here thinking, oh, that's sounds familiar. That storyline certainly sounds familiar. What do you think shifted for you when you realized the difference between home being that safe space and school being that place of I can't really be myself?
It was very early, and once the shift was made in my little brain, I wasn't always the problem.
Mm,
You know, I began to see that this teacher had problems with me.
mhm,
And my grandmother, being raised in the segregated South, was more compliant. You just be compliant and you find ways and show them how smart you are. But my daddy was more, if they mess with you, you call me. Kind of. So he got lots of phone calls. But very early, and research bears this out, little Black girls who are smart, even today, are treated worse than any other child.
mhm,
Absolutely.
Little Black, and I knew I was smart. They tried to put me in special ed, but back then, to put a child in special ed, you had to give them an IQ test. And what happened is that I tested a genius level.
mhm,
They were all shocked. They couldn't put me in special ed. They skipped me a grade, skipped me another half grade. Back then, you had semesters. But the teachers didn't appreciate it. I was Miss Smarty Pants. You think you know everything. So
Mhm.
I was on a mission to be really smart,
mhm,
to really get straight A's. And that helped me in terms of my own self-confidence and self-esteem, but it drew a lot of hostility from teachers.
mhm.
Yeah.
We know sometimes students could potentially seek some nurturing from their teachers, and it doesn't sound like you were able to have that experience, but Big Mama was that nurturing safe space for you.
Absolutely. And my aunts, you know, where there are so many mothers that did not give birth.
Yeah.
Mhm,
So my aunt Catherine was my biggest cheerleader. You know, when Brofenbrenner says every child needs someone who's absolutely crazy about them, Aunt Catherine was crazy about me.
mm,
I could do no wrong in her eyes, even when I was wrong. And she lived next door. And let me qualify, Aunt Catherine was my grandmother's best friend. So
mm,
she wasn't even related. So we
mhm,
have big mamas all over who are not related by blood, who care for the children in that community. And if I did get in trouble, she was right there to save me. Come on over here, baby.
Yeah.
Let me fix you something good to eat. So yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a parallel that I'm hearing and drawing about nurturance and mothering that happens even in the educational system, that there are particularly Black teachers for Black children who serve mothering roles. And then we have in communities that still function as communities, that we have neighbors and we have, people around that serve that mothering role. And so I think sometimes those links go unnoticed or unrecognized, unacknowledged. And they're so important, right? To know that there is someone who thinks that you're amazing, wherever that person is, that to be able to say that you know someone who thinks I can do no wrong, that what I'm doing is valued and valuable, and they will celebrate whatever that is. Wherever you find that person is so amazing because everyone doesn't find that.
Yes.
Or if they find it, they might overlook it or not recognize it because it's not from the traditional space that people recognize and acknowledge. And so I think that we have to highlight and really respect and celebrate the women that we find that are mothering us without being our mothers in whatever
Yes.
space we find them in.
Mhm. In so
Mhm.
many spaces, I think I want to believe that we are developing this generation of teachers to be that way. In our school of education, I'm also a professor in the School of Education at our local university. In churches, I'm seeing it more and more. I was, riding one of our buses, a 16th Street Mall bus, and there was a woman sitting across from me with a switch. And, her baby was very young, and the child kept saying, "No, no, no," and she was, "Don't you tell me no. Don't say no more anymore. I'm gonna whoop you if you tell me no." And I'm sitting there, and in this society, when you say those spaces that still operate as a community, we're not always welcome.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that I'm auntie now, and
Mhm.
I embrace that. So I'm looking, thinking, "How am I gonna stop this woman from using that switch?"
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh my goodness, I bet your baby is 2." She goes,
Mhm.
"How do you know?" I said, "Girl, did you know the 2-year-olds, their job is to say no?
Mm.
No means no, no means yes. No is one of their favorite words in the world. And guess what? They're not being defiant. They're not going against you. They just can't help it because this is where they are. They say no all the time."
Mm.
And she looked at me and I thought, uh-oh, because you don't know how that's gonna be taken.
Mhm.
And I said, "I'm just telling you, I'm a teacher and I teach teachers and stuff." She goes, "Have I been whooping my baby for no reason?"
Mhm.
Mm.
And I said, "We don't know what we don't know.
Mhm.
Mm.
We don't. And who teaches us this? How would you know that your baby's job is to say no?" And I said, "Girl, let me tell you, when they get 3, it's gonna be worse.
Mhm.
3s are tougher than 2s."
Mhm.
She goes, "Well, how do I know?" I ended up giving her my phone number. "Call me if you have any questions." I was in touch with her until that child was about 7, and I think they moved out of the area. Talk about breaking, and I don't wanna call it generational curses, generational practices that no longer serve us,
Mhm.
and really helping her to understand that historically, through slavery, we learned to beat our children into submission
Mm.
because they had to survive.
Mhm.
Mm.
Have evolved from survival, from surviving to thriving.
Mhm.
So our job now is to help our children to thrive. And I say it in this way because it's very important that we are not putting down, criticizing any of the practices that happened back then because they were very, very necessary.
Mhm.
Asking you to really reflect and investigate and to find out why they were necessary, to determine today how unnecessary it is, and how we can become very stagnant as a people if we stay in survival mode and not teach our children how to thrive. So she grew a lot, and I came to love her and to love her baby named Simone and really built that relationship. So getting back to what you're saying, Rikesha, we can nurture, parent, exhibit those characteristics of motherhood anywhere,
Mm.
anywhere.
I love the example that kind of shows the shift between traditional or historical tenets of motherhood versus what we're seeing today with the gentle parenting and millennial moms who are being given credit for rewriting motherhood. And I think that unfortunately, as we move into a season where we do have to teach our children to survive again, that we thrived for a while, but we are moving into a season where survival is going to be imperative, that we are going to have to find a way to bridge those two things. And so my question to you is, what do you think that looks like? How do we teach today's mothers the lessons of old, and how do we kind of bridge those things together?
That is such a good question. It's so funny because even as I was saying it, in the back of my mind, I thought we're entering a new phase now. We have to take what we learned and why, take what we know and how that works, and then bridge those two into this new season we're going into. I'll give you an example. I'm a storyteller, so you'll hear lots of stories. My son and I are martial artists. We started karate, taekwondo very early. And I taught my children to be warriors, to be social justice warriors, to disrupt inequities wherever they are, however they see it. And they've manifested those teachings in different ways. My daughter is a therapist and doing social justice work in mental health. My son was on the front line everywhere there was a protest, from Ferguson to St. Louis, wherever he was there. And now he's in law school, civil rights litigation. That's who he is. But while he was knee deep in protest and showing up all over the country, of course, as a mom, I feared for his safety.
Mhm.
So I had this dilemma. I'm raising a warrior, but I want him to come home.
Mm,
I want him to survive. So it makes me very emotional.
Mhm.
mhm,
Two things happened that challenged that belief and the reality. One was we live in a county called Douglas County, very red county here in Colorado. And he was on his way somewhere and he had on a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And this is right after George Floyd and all that. And he was leaving. And one of the hardest things that I ever did, I said, son, I need you to take your shirt off
Mhm.
or turn it inside out or put something over it. Why, mom? And I said, because if these Douglas County police officers stop you immediately it escalates.
mm,
Put it in your car. When you get there, put it back on. I just need you to get there safely and get home safely. And he says, I'm not taking it off. And he's really a very compliant kid. Dr. Rikesha knows him pretty well. I mean, he's just so easy. But when this belief system, he goes, Mom, I'm not going to take it off. And I said, I need you to come home. He said, well, I'll cover it up. I'll put a shirt over and I'll button it. So that was hard. The second thing was, as a martial artist, if you have kids in karate or anything like that, you notice every single day that they're there, they go through the same routine: how to get out of a lock, how to get out of a chokehold. And they do it because it's muscle memory.
Mhm.
mm,
I promise you that when someone uses one of those grabs, you don't think muscle memory.
mhm,
So part of our muscle memory is if anybody goes anywhere near your neck, you're going to get out of that really fast.
mhm,
So I started to practice with him how to abandon that and
Mhm.
go limp.
mm,
If he's at a protest and one of them puts him in a chokehold, that muscle memory is going to
Mhm.
end, and the possibility of him not coming home becomes very real. And it was very hard. And we would walk around the house and I'd walk in and he'd be cooking and I put him in a chokehold. I just come from behind and grab him. And it's like, son, you got to go limp. You got to do this. But it went against everything we knew and
mm,
everything we learned. And how do you be a warrior but yet fear? So how do I see those things coming together? Ancestrally, we that was ingrained in us to survive, and it actually became a maladaptive response that we call culture. And I think our conscious parenting, gentle parenting, all of the ways we're teaching our children right now is because we want to teach them to be free.
Mhm.
And I think as we transition to this new era, we teach them to survive again while also ingraining in them that they are free,
Mhm.
that this is a survival technique, that you have the right to do this. Finally, I told my son, don't ever argue with an officer. Yes, you have a right to not show them ID. You have these rights, but I don't want you dead right.
right.
You do what you have to do. You come home and we'll fight it.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we are. That and actually in some ways that's the teaching of our ancestors. We do what we have to do in front of them while at the same time understanding who we are, where we come from and why. And I think that's how we're going to bridge it. Yes, son, you have a right. And because you are human and they are dead wrong, but we will get them in court. We will get them here.
Mhm.
Do we have to be restrained in some places? Yeah. I'm a cancer survivor. Have some neuropathy. I have a handicap sticker. I was feeling my feet get kind of numb, so I used it on my way to Nordstrom. And this woman, excuse me, you don't look handicapped. Excuse me, you don't look handicapped. There was a time I would have turned around and I
Mhm.
thought, I'm not going to give this woman the time of day. She doesn't even warrant my attention. And I kept walking like I didn't hear her. Excuse me,
Mhm.
excuse me. And the power that I retained by not even responding
Mhm.
felt so much better
Mhm.
than had I turned around to defend. So I
Yeah,
think those are some of the strategies, um, teaching our children who they are, but also um, moving like Harriet, you know, that she did what she had to do. She didn't have to broadcast it, confront it, convince people.
Yeah.
That we do what we have to do to survive, while also in our communities, in our homes, and where it matters, we thrive.
Yeah. I love that.
I do too. I thank you for your storytelling because I'm seeing it visually as you are speaking, and I'm just thinking about going back to Big Mama, and I know there are lots of people who don't have the Big Mama that we're thinking of and that we're talking about. And while we didn't have the same Big Mama, there are some characteristics, and Dr. Rikesha said that the nurturing and the safe space. And there are some millennial mothers who have never experienced what it feels like to have a Big Mama or an auntie, Dr. Rosemarie, or an auntie, Rikesha. And so this response that you've just shared that you've taught to your son and how to navigate these situations where we've got historical and present day sameness fighting against us, what do you say to that young woman as she's trying to mother and parent her children with all of this?
Absolutely. Felicia, I really appreciate the question, and I think I wanna start with the big mamas and the aunties,
Mhm.
that while we have the lived experience, we don't own it,
Mhm.
and these new moms, they deserve respect
Mhm.
and love. No, you can't teach, interact, influence anyone unless they know you care about them.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we have to be intentional in showing that love and nurturing without a lot of finger pointing and instruction to people we don't have a relationship with.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, that young lady on the bus, I was very intentional in
Mhm.
respecting who she is as a young mom and not, "Don't you hit that baby one more time."
Right.
Mhm.
You know? So,
Right.
as aunties and as I'm gonna even say elders, oh, did I say that? That we were taught that because we're of a certain age, that we can demand respect, and we can't.
Right.
We have to love our way into being respected.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
I had a black student, and my university is predominantly white, and, she would come in late every day. I'm like, "Really?" So finally, I said, "Let me talk to you after class." And because I had a relationship with her, I could pull my black mama card.
Mhm.
Mhm.
"Girl, don't you come back in my classroom late one more day. You know better. They're looking at you, they're looking at me, and you're gonna disrespect me like this in front of these white folks. Don't you come back here late another day." And I could say it like that because she knew I loved her
Mhm.
Mhm.
and I cared about her.
Mhm.
I couldn't
Mhm.
say that to a stranger.
Right.
Right.
So, what we have to do is share the wisdom, why it's there, offer our support, give that phone number, and let them know, "Girl, I love you and I love your baby. I am here for you. I am here to help you raise that child. You are not alone."
Mhm.
You're right, because see what happened between the big mama and the millennials, this horrible, terrible thing happened in our community in the '80s with this whole crack generation.
Mm,
And we lost grandmothers. We lost
right.
mamas. So a lot
Yes.
of these kids are trying this, doing this all on their own, and they need us,
Mm.
and they need us desperately, but they don't need mean mamas.
Right.
Right.
They need
Wow.
loving, caring mothers. They need these boys, girl, they need soft bosoms.
Mhm.
They need to be able to cry it out.
Mhm.
We need to be able to say we're scared. So
Mhm.
the things that work, we hold on to. The things that did not work, we are not trying to raise toxic men
Right.
and strong Black
Mhm.
women in that sense. Girl,
Right.
we all need a good cry.
Mhm.
Right.
I was in a meeting the other day and someone said, "Rosemarie, you look stressed. Are you okay?" I don't know what it is about "are you okay" that just can bring me to tears. Like, "No, I'm not okay. I'm not." And I think we have to allow for that.
Mhm.
No, there are safe spaces to do that, and there are other spaces you just have to hold on till you can find that soft bosom.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, did I answer your question?
You did, and I have like 5 more, but I'm not gonna ask them all in succession, but you brought up someone we didn't mention, which was the mean mama, but we have big mama, mean mama, millennial mama. Sometimes mean mama is hurt mama or
Mhm,
angry mama or tired mama,
mhm,
and while our millennial moms have access to so many more resources today, they're missing that component that you just described, which is this community and this soft bosom. What do you think? And I may want to put Dr. Rikesha not on the spot, but I know she's a millennial mama. What do you see, Rikesha, between what we think about as big mama and millennial moms today?
So the question is interesting, and I was thinking about it. I had a conversation with some of my students this week. I'm teaching a human growth and development class, and I think it was last week. And we were talking about the fact that historically, grandma was the older, gray, feeble, young, older woman. And now, particularly when we think about teenage pregnancies and when we think about just the shift in agriculture into the modern day society, all of the things that we've gone through, that, if you think about a woman who is 15 and has a baby, and if that 15-year-old has a baby, she's 30 and she has a grandchild. And if that 15-year-old has a baby, she's 45 and she has a great grandchild, right? And so grandma doesn't look the way the media portrays grandma, right? And so
mhm,
I think sometimes we dismiss the energy of the historical figure because it doesn't look the way that we expect it to look. Because if
mhm,
you have a grandmother, you still have access to someone who's gone through something before you, right?
Right.
And she might be 42, 47. She might not be 75, which is what historically and in the media, the way we portray what grandma looks like. And particularly for us millennials, I don't actually ascribe to the term millennial, but here we are. We'll move on from that. Uh, but if you think about millennials, when we were watching TV and growing up, every show had a grandma, and that grandma was much older than the family, right? And
mhm,
so when we think about grandmas in our own families, they don't look the same. It doesn't feel the same. It's not giving the same energy where you go and sit at the rocking chair and she's going to braid your hair and the little things that we saw on TV that were not even indicative of what was happening in our homes anyway, right? But
True.
it was the ideal. And so I think that part of the the challenge that we have is owning what Big Mama looks like today, who gets
mhm,
to be Big Mama, who we respect or don't respect as Big Mama, and then all the people in between there, what is their place? Because if I don't fit this, do I not have a place? And that's not the
Mm.
case because everybody has a place, right? And so I think
Right.
we have to redesign what our family structures look like, what it means, and what the roles are, and own it for ourselves. We cannot continue to ascribe to American societal definition of family. It never, ever, ever fit what our familial kinships look like anyway, but it still is not serving us. And it is serving us even less as we went through, that 1980s breakdown of community and all of those things. And so when we get to this place where we have to teach survival to people who don't know anything about surviving and only know about thriving. When we get to this place where it is our responsibility to teach our children that they are both free and in danger, that's a hard lesson, a hard pill to swallow every day.
Mm,
I've said this multiple times. There was a time, and I'm thankful we're not in this space now, but it is painful, physically painful as a mother to send your child into a place you know they're not safe on a day-to-day basis. And so sending your child to a school where you know the people are out to get them, sending them into a world where they are not safe, it is painful. But there are people around us who have resources. And if we keep trying to live in these bubbles where it's just my family, instead of understanding that we as a community have things that we can offer one another, and we will be better together than I will be by myself, we will not be able to continue to move forward. And so we have to open ourselves up to community and be careful who we allow in our community, because everybody doesn't want to be a part of our community. Be careful.
Mhm.
very true. Very true. And Dr. Rosemarie, when she mentioned that aspect of the 80s, we hadn't even considered that as a part of our conversation. But now that you brought it up, I'm thinking we need to have another conversation to talk about that because it feels like the media substituted and gave us Family Matters and Cosby Show and Different World to say, this is how you fix what we disrupted
Mhm,
for you. And
Mhm.
that presented another problem,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Absolutely.
I thank you for bringing that up because that might be something that we need to address deeper, but they begin feeding us this picture, and you started this conversation sharing about education, and we hinted a little bit about how for some children, teachers are that nurturing space for them. But your leadership at the Institute for Racial Equity and Excellence has impacted policies across education, government, corporate sectors. How do these systemic inequities in early childhood education affect Black mothers and their children?
Oh my gosh. You probably know, and I'll just give some statistics. First, we know that Black boys are the most suspended in all of America. We
Mhm.
know that Black boys are suspended very, very early. Black children are. What is the youngest age you think children start getting suspended or kicked out of their educational program?
I'm going to guess 5.
8 months.
Oh my goodness.
At 8 months old, usually for crying or biting. And what we know is that the risk factor for being suspended is having been suspended before. So if a child is kicked out of their early childhood child care program at 8 months for crying or biting, they go to another program. At about 2 years old, that people say the terrible twos, now they're kicked out just for being two.
mhm,
And then threes or twos on steroids, now they're kicked out for being three. And then 4-year-olds know everything. And by this time, they've already realized that school is not a safe space for me.
mhm,
So at 4, they're kicked out. So these children can be kicked out of 4 programs before they ever enter kindergarten. And now they enter kindergarten totally disengaged. And now, what we find out, especially little Black girls who have gone through this, when they get to middle school,
mhm,
they have made up their minds that they will never be mistreated by a teacher again.
mhm,
And that's when you see suspensions and expulsions and push out explode. But
Mm,
how does this impact the mother child relationships?
mhm,
Childcare is hard to find and is very expensive. The child gets kicked out for biting or crying. What am I going to do to stop this? Now I
mhm,
have to find another school because this baby has caused me this problem. By the time they're 2, you better behave or I'm going to whoop your butt
mm,
because they have to survive.
mhm,
I can't lose my job. You are misbehaving. And this teacher creates a narrative about the child. And a mother who doesn't understand this or who is struggling and still in survival mode, they accept that.
mhm.
And the school is toxic and home is toxic. And what we're seeing is an increase in suicide rates of Black boys from age 5 to 12.
Yeah,
That suicide rate has exploded.
yep.
And my theory, this is a Rosemarieism, I don't have the research to back this up, but my theory is that when school is toxic and a child has no safe place to go to, they don't wanna live to be 6.
Mhm.
Mm,
So, it negatively impacts the parent-child relationship.
Yeah.
And the other side of that, which happened to me, then you have a mom who's not gonna put up with it because I'm still dealing with my own trauma of being kicked out. So you
mm,
will never treat my child like this. So my children were instructed, something happens, you let me know. I'm at the school all the time. But when something happened to my daughter and I went there, it was an embarrassment to her. And she decided that she would not tell me anymore. So we have to balance those things out.
mhm,
And finally, when I gained her trust and she would tell me, but I don't want you to do anything. You know how hard that is?
Mhm.
Mom, but I don't want you to go to the school. I don't want you to do this. So it really impacts that relationship of where you want to be protector and defender. You want to respect the boundaries of your child. You want to build that trust. And also, if you don't know, and a teacher is painting your child in a certain way, and you don't feel equipped to defend them,
mhm,
and you accept it because, again, some of that ancestral ways of being that teachers are professionals and they're right.
Mhm.
right.
You can walk anywhere in America and hear a person say, "Well, why would the teacher lie on my child?"
Mhm. Mhm.
Because parents believe that. So that's why we have to really, in this surviving, thriving stage we're entering into, help to educate parents about some of the data, some of the things that are going on. And,
Mhm,
this is my own, again, a Rosemarieism. I'm gonna believe you. You're always gonna be safe at home.
right.
You see, that's what my daddy said. He said, "You do what you need to do at school, and I will defend you." And because I never lied. I mean, "Rose, did you do it?" "No, daddy, I didn't." "Defend me to the end of the earth," because he knew. "Rose, did you do it?" And I said, "Yes, daddy, I did." "Well, you knew better. We'll take care of that at home." But
Mhm,
still defended me in front of the teachers.
Mhm.
right. Right.
One of the things that we don't talk enough about, we hear about it, but not in Black spaces, let me say this, is the issue of school trauma for our children, and how important school trauma is and how it follows them from preschool all the way into college, depending on the settings that they're in. But I think one of the things that we don't talk about at all is the school trauma that parents experience and what it means. You spoke a little bit about the parent child relationship. And in the event that the parent child relationship is not damaged, that parent still has trauma.
Mm.
Every time the phone rings, their heart drops. Every time there's a text message, their heart drops. Just going to the school can be a very sad, scary experience, even if you're just going for registration, just going for any of those things. And so, in light of that, and as we're moving through the experiences that we're moving through right now, what are some of the immediate changes that we need to look out for in teaching and supporting Black mothers who are raising children who are school aged and are raising the next generation?
Thank you. And what you said is so very important because after you have a child, you are required to return to the source of your trauma.
Mhm,
And it is hard. So I think the first step is recognizing it and saying it because we don't tell parents that you were traumatized in school.
mhm,
This was not a safe space for you. Teachers did not treat you well. Principals did not believe you. You were suspended all the time. And I think helping them feel heard in that way because even our science today, our scholarship, when you think about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and
Mhm,
you look at those 10 indicators, they're all about what happened at home. Did
mhm,
your parents hit you? Did you have an alcoholic parent? Was your parent incarcerated? Why don't we create one that talks about how schools traumatized us?
yeah.
mhm.
Were you suspended? Did teachers hit you? Do you know I was beaten at school with paddles regularly?
Wow.
So let's talk about that trauma, validate what the parents may not even know they're holding,
Mhm,
Mhm,
and then talk about and help them understand that this school belongs to you.
mhm,
And I tell my teachers all the time, my students, When whatever school you go to, unless you live in that community, you are a guest and a visitor.
Mm.
You don't go in and set up classrooms, my class, my rules, my this. No, it's not yours. Your first assignment is to get involved with that community and find out how they do it. And when parents can really make that shift, that this is our school, my tax base probably pays a person's whole salary.
Mhm.
I have a right to be here to shape and influence what happens to my children. Because guess what? White parents do it all the time.
That's right.
They're one of the most powerful, organized groups we have ever seen. You know, it was two white parents that started this initiative that banned books across the country. Two,
Two.
two. This is your school. This is your community. You go when you can. You show up, you call the teacher. The other thing I want to say, we have to be very careful not to set ourselves up and our children up. So if
Mhm.
your child gets in trouble, like for hitting, and they've hit a few times and you're getting phone calls, the natural inclination is when you go to pick that child up is to say, how were they today? Did he hit anybody? Don't
Mhm.
ever, 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 ever do not. Because what you're doing, you're shaping that teacher's brain to look out for negative information on your child.
Mhm.
When you go up and say, tell me what they did great today.
Mm.
Tell me how awesome their day was. What friends did they have and who did they play with? The first two times the teacher's going to be shocked, like, huh? She's ready to give you all the negative information.
Mhm.
But when you do that consistently, that teacher will start to look for what was good, right, great. And your child, so she'll have something to report on when you come. So we have to shift that narrative for our children and for our schools.
I love that.
I do. We have definitely started some additional conversations within this conversation today. I wish we had more time and could just dig in a little bit more and talk more about Big Mamas and talk more about our aunties with you and learning more about the policy changes and the equitable work that needs to be done and some of the changes that we could consider doing. So, for those who are also social justice advocates, that are listeners, my usual audience, I would address as "Hey, changemakers." And so we are in good company today. So they're hearing, especially for National Black Girl Month, but understand this is still an audience of changemakers, of people who want to know how they can put their footprint or add their name or make noise about something. For those who are looking to get active and do some work and maybe supporting what you're doing, how can they do that?
I can be found at rosemarieallen.com.
Simple enough.
That's right.
Simple enough. Dr. Rosemarie, you have been an incredible guest. I have felt all the emotions over here. I'm not even going to lie. Dr. Rikesha, thank you for joining as well. We'll be back again with more conversations. Please check the show notes for Dr. Rosemarie's website, including her full bio and more ways that you can connect with her and her work. Thank you all. The best leaders know that strategy happens in real time, in the right room, with the right people. That's why I created Momentum Lab, where creators and changemakers meet weekly to break down challenges, refine their strategies, and move forward with momentum. If you're ready to sharpen your next move, join us at lab.feliciafordandco.com. Hey, Changemaker, real quick before you go, if today's episode helped you in some way, the best way to thank me is to head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the channel, and leave a review. I'd also love to connect with you over on social. You can find me at Friends Call Me Fee. Until next time, keep changing the game.